Your role, the one buried beneath years of survival, has just come online. And no, this isn't coincidence. You're not watching this by mistake. You're here because something ancient, something divine, has started to stir in the fabric of your life. This is alignment, not algorithm. God orchestrated this moment, reached through time itself, and chose now to wake you up. There's an assignment written in the marrow of your bones. One so sacred, even you couldn't see it until now. It's been sealed, protected, even hidden from your own awareness, waiting for this exact moment to break open. The delays? Done. The fog? Lifting. You are not just hearing a call, you are being positioned. Heaven didn't just know your name, it's been whispering it long before you ever heard his voice. The angels, they've been posted, silent, still, watching you from the edge of eternity, waiting for this very hour. And now that the seal has broken, the scroll of your life is being opened. The hidden decree over you is no longer dormant. You're not just being invited, you're being launched into a divine operation. You may feel unequipped, but God never checks resumes. He looks for surrender, not status. He doesn't recruit the elite. He anoints the available. You, yes, you, have been conscripted under heaven's authority, set apart by divine strategy. And from this moment forward, you'll feel the winds shift. The atmosphere will change. Warfare will rise. Yes, but so will the force behind you. What once stood against you will now tremble because you're moving under a power far greater than yourself. Paul said it in Ephesians chapter 2. We were raised with Christ and seated in heavenly realms. That's your source. Not applause, not performance. Heaven is your endorsement. You no longer need outside approval when you've been internally appointed. And yes, tomorrow the world might still look the same, but you won't. Because once your mission goes live, you're no longer a civilian. You're heaven's agent in the middle of enemy territory. You were never meant to blend in. You were crafted to disrupt. The moment your calling activated, everything around you began to shift. What once oppressed you now senses the authority rising in your bones. What used to intimidate you will soon bow to the fire behind your eyes. You don't just walk into rooms anymore. You shift the atmosphere just by being in them. Don't minimize that. Don't mute what was divinely placed inside you. That quiet voice inside, the one that keeps whispering, "There's more." That's not your imagination. It's the echo of your assignment trying to cut through the static of survival. You've been living below your inheritance for far too long. But tonight the veil is lifting. You were chosen to birth what this world has never seen. A breaker, a builder, a blueprint in motion. You carry a divine design that hell tried to smother but couldn't. Every tear you cried was documented. Every betrayal you endured, permitted, not to break you, but to protect what was sealed inside. The enemy saw it before you did. He recognized what you carried and made it his mission to stop it, not because of who you were, but because of who you were becoming. Your name echoed through dark corridors long before you ever whispered your first prayer. And still, you're here. Why? Because grace kept you breathing long enough for this exact moment. This isn't symbolic, it's strategic. Your timeline has been disrupted, the alarm in heaven has sounded, and your name was on the list. The angels have been dispatched, the heavens have opened, and no, not everyone will understand it. That's because this is not for public explanation, it's for prophetic execution. Your spirit has been drafted into something eternal. Let every insecurity collapse under this one truth. God makes no mistakes. He doesn't release power without purpose. He doesn't send fire without preparation. And he doesn't call the unqualified. He qualifies the obedient. You are not an optional part of the plan. You're essential to it. That fire in you, it's not gone. It's just been waiting for the right breath to ignite it. And this is that breath. You've never truly been hidden, just misunderstood. Long before you called yourself chosen, there were eyes on you from both heaven and hell. Your name was whispered in dimensions you've never stepped into. You were marked, not at birth, but at conception. The fingerprint of God was etched into your soul, and darkness took notice. You weren't overlooked. You were concealed for a time such as this. Even when you tried to shrink, blend in, play it small, something inside you wouldn't let you. That magnetic pull toward the unseen, that weight you couldn't explain, it wasn't anxiety, it was activation. You've lived as a target not because of who you are on the outside, but because of what you carry on the inside. You've been hunted by hell and protected by heaven, all at once, because your soul holds something that threatens every lie darkness built. That childhood ache, that early sorrow, it wasn't just pain, it was prophetic interference. The enemy strikes early when he sees anointing. He attempts to traumatize destiny before it becomes functional. But even in your confusion, your soul remembered what your mind couldn't grasp yet. There's more. And while your prayers faltered, heaven never blinked. The silence wasn't absence, it was preparation. Every breakdown was recorded, not as evidence of weakness, but as proof of endurance. Heaven doesn't crown the strongest. It crowns the ones who keep walking when they have every reason to stop. Your scars? They're inked into eternity as signs of survival. That's why the pressure came every time you started to heal. Hell was checking your pulse, hoping you'd stay down. But here you are, breathing with fire in your chest. This isn't paranoia, it's surveillance. You've been watched because you were born to shake foundations. You were a problem before you even knew your power. Darkness doesn't waste energy, it only circles what it fears. And now you understand. Your life was never random. It was a disruption waiting for permission. And tonight, that permission has been granted. Every moment you thought was a setback was actually divine surveillance. Heaven didn't miss a step. Not the tears, not the silence, not the nights you couldn't breathe through the pain. You were never alone, not in the pit, not in the wilderness, not even in the places where it felt like God went quiet. The silence was sacred. It wasn't punishment, it was precision. Heaven was only allowing what could serve your strength later. What you called delay, God called design. The doors that slammed weren't rejection, they were protection. The relationships that fell apart, that was heaven tearing down what would have contaminated your mantle. Nothing was wasted, not the heartbreak, not the closed paths, not the wrong turns. Every misstep became a message. Every loss became leverage. And now, heaven's eyes aren't just watching, they're holding you accountable. You don't get to play small anymore. You've always felt the difference, haven't you? That low hum in your spirit saying, you're not like them. That unshakable awareness that normal doesn't fit. You weren't weird. You were marked, set apart, sanctified through fire and filtered through silence. That heaviness, it wasn't depression, it was distinction. The more you resisted average, the more it made sense. You weren't meant to blend in. You were born to break through. And the attacks, the relentless, suffocating weight that pressed on you for years, that wasn't proof of failure. It was proof of fire. No one robs an empty vault. No one attacks an empty house. The resistance over your life has always been proportional to the calling on it. You were carrying purpose long before you knew its name. The spiritual warfare wasn't random. It was strategic, because you're not just living, you're leading. The moment your identity clicked into place, everything started to make sense. You're not being watched because you're weak. You're being watched because you're dangerous. Both realms have taken notice. Hell sends fear, heaven sends fire. And now that you finally understand who you are, the surveillance no longer scares you. It activates you. You don't flinch under pressure. You remember your orders. Those dreams you shrugged off because they felt too vivid, that weight on your chest that came out of nowhere, the pressure that made no sense for the life you were living, that was your spirit screaming for alignment. Every time you felt watched, every time you sensed a presence when the room was empty, it wasn't paranoia, it was prophecy, something sacred, trying to break through your spiritual static. You've been carrying a role your environment couldn't explain. That's why they misunderstood you, why you were labeled dramatic, sensitive, too deep. The truth is, they were reacting to something ancient in you, something they couldn't name. but could feel. The discomfort wasn't personal. It was spiritual recognition. You reminded them of something they weren't ready to face, that there's more, and that more has always been inside you. You spent years apologizing for your depth, dimming your light, shrinking your voice to fit into rooms that were never designed to contain you. You buried your gift, not because it lacked value, but because the room lacked vision. But here's what you never lost: that ember, that divine awareness curled up in the basement of your soul, waiting, not dead, just dormant, preserved until the day you could carry it without compromise. That day is now. You're not crazy, you're not off, you're early, ahead of your time, ahead of your comfort zone, ahead of your own understanding. What once made you feel isolated is now being redefined as sacred. That ache in your chest, that's not loneliness. It's the weight of your calling pulling you forward. You thought you were forgotten, but the truth is, you were hidden on purpose. God kept you from patterns that would have dulled your blade, from cycles that would have buried your roar. You were preserved, not rejected, separated, not sidelined. Everything that didn't open for you didn't, because heaven was keeping your oil uncontaminated. And now the veil is lifting, the pruning is over, the fire is rising, and the version of you that emerges from this won't need to explain a thing. It will be undeniable. Some seasons were so heavy, you didn't even know why you were crying. No language, no context, just a weight sitting in your chest like a wordless storm. That wasn't weakness. It was spiritual stretching. The breaking you went through wasn't random. It was pruning. God doesn't always explain the process because the process isn't meant to be understood. It's meant to be survived. You endured for reasons you're only now beginning to see. People judged your silence, misunderstood your distance, called your stillness strange, but stillness was your shield. The more carnal minds tried to label you, the more heaven was building you in secret. Some things are too sacred for exposure. Your tears were hidden intercessions, your ache an offering. And through it all, you didn't break. You deepened. You weren't weak. You were being wired for something holy. That's why nothing average could satisfy you. Why normal drained you. You've always carried a signal that made shallow waters feel unbearable. Because you weren't born for the surface. You were carved for the deep. The jobs, the relationships, the routines, they couldn't hold you because they weren't built for the weight of your fire. You were made for disruption, for divine friction, for the kind of truth that makes the lukewarm burn. You've been different since childhood, pretending to be okay while your spirit whispered, "This isn't it," smiling while your soul screamed for something more. And now, all of it is making sense. God didn't choose you because you were loud. He chose you because you were listening. He trusted you with silence, with rejection, with the ache of invisibility. And now, He's trusting you with revelation. That ache wasn't punishment. It was proof. That tension in your soul, it was your anointing refusing to die quietly. You've walked through storms that were never yours, fought battles for bloodlines that stopped with you. Your wilderness was never wasted. Your isolation wasn't accidental. Heaven's been sculpting you in obscurity because what you carry demands purity. Now the fire in your bones is undeniable, and you're not going back. You've been holding your breath for years, afraid that what you carry might scare people, afraid that your truth would break the image they needed you to maintain. So you stayed quiet, you played small, you edited your roar, but your silence was never safety. It was suffocation. And now heaven has declared, enough. The seal is broken. The voice inside you is no longer optional. It's necessary. Your gift isn't noise, it's a compass. It doesn't just stir emotion, it realigns atmospheres. What you thought was just empathy, it was discernment in disguise. What you called being sensitive, it was your spirit tuned into frequencies others couldn't hear. You didn't fit in because you were never meant to. The truth is, your DNA was never common. You've been seeing through things your whole life, and now you know why. That intuition you second-guessed, that knowing you tried to silence, it's your spiritual weapon. and it's waking up with fire in its lungs. The things you thought were flaws were actually fragments of your calling. You were never weak. You were aware. You were never too much. You were tuned in. And now that alignment is becoming undeniable. What once confused you is now becoming your clarity. You've had dreams lately, visions even, where the veil feels thinner, where reality bends, where truth cuts sharper than usual. That's not random. That's heaven tapping on the walls of your soul, reminding you you're not asleep anymore. The part of you that once begged for silence now demands expression. Your gift didn't die. It waited, it adjusted, and now it's roaring back to the surface. You don't need permission to speak. You need obedience to act. What you carry breaks chains, not just in you, but in everyone assigned to your voice. This is bigger than you. Your words aren't just words. They are codes, triggers, keys for the locked. The enemy didn't attack you for what you said. He attacked you to stop what you'd eventually say. And now that you've found your sound again, he's already too late. This isn't about being loud. It's about being aligned. You've spent years muting yourself to make others comfortable, biting your tongue to avoid tension, holding back truth just to keep peace. But peace built on silence is a prison, and heaven is breaking down every wall that kept your gift confined. You weren't given a voice to entertain. You were given a voice to establish. What you say now carries weight in both realms. There were moments, small, quiet moments, where you spoke and the atmosphere shifted. Someone cried, someone healed, someone paused and stared like they heard something ancient inside your voice. That wasn't charisma. That was anointing. That was spiritual current leaking through your sound. And heaven has taken notice. Because when you speak from alignment, your words don't land. They strike, they break, they build. You were never meant to blend in. You were born to broadcast. Even your whispers shake strongholds. Even your sighs release frequencies that heaven recognizes and hell fears. That's why your voice was targeted. Why your confidence was constantly under siege. Because if the enemy could silence you, he could stall the chain reaction your voice was designed to trigger. But now you know, you're not just talking. You're unlocking. Every dream where you were speaking boldly, singing loudly, praying fiercely. It wasn't fantasy. It was prophecy. Your mouth has been weaponized by God. The word in you is no longer theory. It's becoming a sword. And every time you declare what heaven has shown you, the earth responds. Creation listens to conviction. That's why resistance rises every time you try to step out in boldness. It's because your voice works. But here's what hell forgot. Your silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. You were reloading, and now the fire in your mouth cannot be tamed. Your prayers will peel back layers of deception. Your declarations will slice through confusion. Your voice is no longer waiting for permission. It's moving on purpose. The hesitation is broken. The roar is released. Speak, chosen one. Because silence is no longer an option. There comes a moment when heaven refuses to let you hide. When the invisible cloak is torn off and your life is no longer permitted to stay in the background. Not because you crave the spotlight, but because your light has become too disruptive to ignore. You've spent years in quiet places, growing roots no one saw. But now, the fruit is undeniable. You don't fit in the old spaces anymore, and you're not supposed to. You've lived through invisible seasons, rooms where your heart showed up, but your name was forgotten, opportunities that overlooked you, moments that left you wondering if God had forgotten you too. But none of it was neglect. It was insulation. God wasn't hiding you from people. He was hiding you from patterns. You were preserved, not punished, protected, not passed over. And now the unveiling begins. This won't look like fame. It'll feel like fire, an internal earthquake where everything small starts to feel suffocating. Even your old thoughts will start revolting. The conversations that once nourished you now taste hollow. The places you once called safe now echo with discomfort. That's not disloyalty. It's alignment. Heaven is clearing the airspace because your launch has already begun. The ground you once tiptoed is about to feel your full weight. You've spent so long helping others build, holding doors for people who never even looked back. But now, the shift has arrived. You're not stepping up from ego. You're being summoned by execution. You've done the inner work. You've carried weight in rooms where no one knew your name, but God knew, and He's flipping the script. You're going from overlooked to undeniable, not because of volume, but because of visibility. And no, you don't need to explain this version of you. You don't owe anyone a presentation. What you carry speaks for itself now. The very tears you whispered in secret are becoming public authority. You're not coming out wounded, you're coming out weaponized. The silence trained you, the rejection refined you. And now, you're not waiting for a platform. You are one, built by fire, released by heaven. This isn't about chasing approval anymore. It's about owning assignment. The prayers you once whispered through gritted teeth are now roaring through your steps. You're not stepping out for applause. You're stepping out because heaven said now. You're not the same person who entered the wilderness. You left pieces of fear behind in caves no one saw. And what's rising now isn't noise, it's knowing. You don't need a crowd, you've got a commission. Matthew chapter 5 calls it out. You are the light of the world, a city on a hill that cannot be hidden. That wasn't a compliment, it was a calling. You weren't made to blend. You weren't designed for background roles. Your visibility isn't vanity, it's warfare. Every time you show up in truth, someone else gets permission to wake up. And that ripple matters more than you know. Yes, some will misunderstand this version of you. That's fine. You weren't revealed for their comfort. You were revealed for kingdom disruption. You don't need them to validate what they were never called to carry. They didn't bleed for this. You did. And heaven saw every drop. That oil on your life, it didn't come cheap. It was pressed from years of silence, shadow, and surrender. You were not crowned by chance, you were crushed for it. Now everything about how you move is shifting. You walk different, think different, speak with a weight that makes rooms pause. And you're not asking, do I belong here? Anymore. You know because the ground reacts when you arrive. Conversations shift, atmospheres adjust. And that's not arrogance, it's evidence. You're walking with the scent of the throne still on your skin, and hell smells it too. And listen, you're not walking alone. Heaven didn't call you just to abandon you in transition. The provision is coming. The right doors will open. The right allies will find you. You're not launching into thin air. You're stepping into a divine path that's already been prepared for your feet. If this word lit something inside you, don't hold it. Share it. Someone else is still buried in silence, waiting for your flame to reach them. There's a shake that happens when you finally step into your assignment. Not a gentle breeze, an atmospheric rupture. Systems feel it. Spirits feel it. Even people who don't know what's happening feel a disturbance when you enter the room. Because you weren't born to maintain what's broken, you were born to expose it. You carry confrontation in your essence, not from attitude, but from anointing. You weren't placed on this earth to keep things the same. You were positioned to shatter cycles, flip tables, and unmask the tolerated lies that have lingered for generations. Your presence alone disturbs anything fake. You don't even need to speak. Your alignment convicts what's been hiding in plain sight. And that discomfort people feel around you, it's not your burden to carry. It's their denial finally feeling pressure. Your life doesn't whisper, it challenges. It confronts the systems that were never designed for freedom. And yes, that will cost you. Comfort, familiarity, sometimes even relationships. Because not everyone is built to breathe where you're going. But hear this, the ones who resist your growth were never meant to steward your calling. You are not too much. You are too true. And truth has always been unsettling to shallow waters. There will be rooms where you're not welcomed, but watch what happens when you stay anyway. The ground will shift, Not because you're trying to be disruptive, but because heaven moves through you. Your presence is a mirror. People either rise or run. And that's not arrogance, it's assignment. Jesus didn't calm every space he entered. Sometimes he stirred it. And that same spirit lives in you. So stop apologizing for being the disruption. You weren't created to echo culture. You were designed to establish kingdom. Every time you walk into a place with your fire intact, something that's been dormant starts shaking. That's not pride, that's purpose. And if the darkness is reacting, it means you're moving right. Keep going, chosen one. You're not a guest in this world. You're a divine interruption. You've begun to feel it, the pull between who you were and who you're becoming, that quiet fracture between your old rhythm and this new sacred tempo. You're not drifting, you're ascending. And yes, the air is thinner here, fewer voices, fewer handholds, but more clarity, more power. Elevation isolates because glory doesn't dwell in crowds. It rests on consecrated ground. You're being pulled higher, and everything in you that still clings to comfort is being peeled away. Old conversations feel shallow. Surface-level living tastes like dust. It's not a mood, it's a migration. You're outgrowing the environments that once felt safe because you're becoming a dwelling place for fire. This isn't emotional, it's structural. Heaven is rebuilding you from the inside out. And the ache you felt, it's not loneliness. It's legacy trying to be born. You weren't called to follow the path. You were called to carve it. And yes, it hurts. Yes, it costs. But glory always has a price. This climb isn't about status. It's about surrender. And the more you release, the more you rise. You're not losing people. You're gaining position. Not everyone can breathe where you're going, but you're still going. Because what you carry isn't negotiable anymore. You're not just an echo, you're a blueprint. And now, with heaven's eyes locked on you, you're no longer walking, you're being commissioned. You are the standard now, the voice, the vessel, and every step you take from this moment on echoes through eternity. Not because you're perfect, but because you're aligned. And aligned people don't need to prove, they just move. So if this word pierced something in your soul, don't let it die in silence. Let it multiply. Comment below, I will rise. Let heaven hear your yes. Let hell hear your footsteps. Share this video. Someone still trapped in their wilderness is waiting to see your light. Subscribe to stay connected to the divine rhythm we're building here. And if you feel led, support this mission. Every act of faith helps ignite someone else's awakening. You weren't called to blend. You were called to burn. Now go. The world's been waiting for what only you can carry.